There we go. So I was just giving them all the scoop on who you are and what you've been up to in these last 8 years, giving them a little rundown on what they could expect if they picked up your book. But so why don't we quickly, now that we have you in here, you can do a little bit of your background. Let me just let them know. So in today's talk, we're going to first have Chris Wilson do his own intro. Then I'll speak just very briefly about who I am and why I'm even doing this. And then we'll go into, as Chris kind of chronologically goes through his life in the book, we're going to have a conversation where we're speaking on who the Chris Wilson was that entered prison, who he was as he was in prison, who he is now in the community, and who have been the influential individuals in your life, how the settings that you were in influenced you. And then finally, we have a call to action. So it is the night before the election, and we'll be touching on that briefly and talking about how to implement change or direct your daily practices towards the implementation of change. So go on, Chris.
Got it. Thank you. So just a little bit about myself. I am originally from Washington, D.C., born and raised. And I grew up under very difficult circumstances, a lot of gun violence, a lot of drug activity. This is around the time when the crack epidemic was sweeping through communities, particularly Black and brown. And, I was very quiet and studious, but a lot of stuff happened to my family. My mom was in an abusive relationship with a police officer who he started stalking our family, and showed up one day and knocked me unconscious. And when I woke up, he was sexually assaulting my mom. So he raped my mom in front of me, and then he tried to kill her. But she survived. We both survived. And he lost his job because he was a police officer. And then he got out like a year and a half later and started stalking our family. And back around this time, there was no law against stalking. And so there was nothing we can do. So I started carrying a gun. And I remember my brother and cousin being gunned down in front of my house. My cousin passed away. My brother survived. And some men came after me after this, and I ended up taking a person's life. And I was a juvenile. I was sentenced. I was charged as an adult. I was 17. And they sentenced me to life in prison. And when I went to prison, I was 118 pounds, didn't have a mustache on my face. And I felt like my life was over. I fell into a deep depression, but I always knew in my heart that I was a good person. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but they came after me, and I decided at this moment that I wanted to prove to myself and to everyone else that my life was redeemable. So I wrote up, it was kind of like a bucket list, but I wrote up what I call my master plan, which was a plan to turn my life around through education and through therapy and through helping other people. And I shared this plan when I was young with my judge and with my grandmother. And so after that, I went to school. I got my high school diploma in 2 months. I did all the vocational shops. I earned a college degree. I taught myself to read and write in several foreign languages. I started mentoring and exercising. And eventually, a long time after this, I was able to get an opportunity to get out of prison and to have a second chance to live, but under certain conditions. My judge told me that, I wrote up this very ambitious plan and that I needed to do everything on the plan. On the plan, I said that I wanted to write a book. I wanted to start, I didn't know what social entrepreneurship meant at the time, but I wanted to start a business that helped people. I wanted to travel the world. And my judge told me, you have to do everything on this plan. And so I've been home from prison for about 8 years, a little over 8 years. And I started several successful companies. I've helped, actually, I know the number. I helped 281 people get jobs in Baltimore City, won every award in the state of Maryland, a few classes away from earning another college degree, been offered a full ride at Harvard Business School, won a presidential award from Obama. My book's being turned into a film. And I started making art and selling my art all around the world. I mean, it just never stopped. But the most important thing about my story and the work that I do is that what I've learned throughout this journey is that, even with self-improvement, it's not just about me. And so I've been on a quest to help other people, the other Christians of the world, help people understand how I ended up in prison and how I can help people that's behind the fence. And so I know that was a lot, but in a nutshell, that's pretty much my story.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I don't want to I want to talk about myself. I didn't get a Obama thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Well,
like in the White House. I was like, how am I in the White House cracking open bottles of wine? Like, I can't believe it. Like, how did I get here? I was,
that's what we have to figure out, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
How you got there. So I think one of the things that you write in the book that I really liked, you said a plan starts at the end. And I liked that, right? Like
Yes.
the idea is what's the end game? And you have to have some direction. And so, one of the things that a lot of people talk about and hear for especially young Black men living in inner city communities or marginalized communities is this idea that I won't live past 21, right?
Yeah, I was one of these guys. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so, what do you think allowed you when you were in prison? Like, you had life, right? Like,
Yeah.
you did any part of you accept that, or did you always think I'm going to figure out a way to get out?
So the first year, maybe and a half, I was just like, I'm never getting out of here. And like simple stuff was like, get up and like comb your hair. And it's like, for what? I'm going down here. Like, I'm not so no. But at a certain point, and with the support of like therapy and surrounding myself with positive people, I started to develop what I call a positive delusion. And the positive delusion was, if you really like strive to turn your life around, if you go to therapy, when you have this opportunity, which you had to believe that you would have it, that when you get out, that you would be successful. And so people thought I was crazy. Like 6 years in, 8 years in, I'm studying flashcards, and I have subscriptions to the Wall Street Journal, and I'm taking notes. And people were like, "What are you doing all this for?
Yeah.
You never getting out." And I was like, "Okay." And so they thought I was crazy until I got out.
But what switched? Like, you had a year and a half of thinking for what, and then you switched. What sparked the switch?
So it was a combination of things, right? Some of them, honestly, right, was a few dreams that I had that was so realistic. I was older in my dreams. I write about some of this in my book of like dreams, the realest dreams I've ever had in my life, where I was older, I was with family members, I was like down in like Miami somewhere with my feet in the water. And it was so real. I took it as like, this is like a sign. And what switched also is when I met my friend Stephen, who also had a life sentence, and he was studying computer code, and it was people fighting and like people arguing over the phone, people doing push-ups and getting tattoos in the rec room, and he was studying software. And what he told me was, they've taken everything from us, but no one can ever take this from us. It's like everything we put in our heads, the knowledge, no one can ever take it from you. And so he's like, you should think about that. And so I thought about it for a couple of days. And I said, I'm smart. Like, I love to read books. I have a good work ethic. I work my ass off. And maybe I should prove to myself and other people how intelligent I am. And so I just started studying. And it was like, we got this course. So we got this program. And I said, let me sign me up. And I would just knock it out. And I started developing more confidence that like I would be successful.
So something that I came across about a year and a half ago was this notion of expanders, and how throughout our lives we have to come into contact with people who are expanders for us, who essentially not only do they create opportunities for us, but they show the possibility that something can be an opportunity for us, right? Like your friend showing you that he's doing this thing, so you could say, oh, he has a life sentence, I'm in that position, but I could be like him. Even your dreams could serve as expanding experiences where you're seeing that this is possible. I think something that's interesting that kind of parallels is you're talking about being in an oppressive system where everything is stacked up against you, and your concept is, for what? Why would I do all these things? And do you feel like living in a community that's hyper surveilled by police, where you're experiencing daily racism, do you feel like that notion of, I'm not going to live past 21, do you feel like that's a similar experience in why people feel that they can't go forward past that time, because it's like, what's the
Right.
point?
So that's absolutely right. And to be honest with you, it's one of the reasons, it's the main reason why I wanted to write a book. And when I thought about writing the book, I hadn't done really anything positive ever in my life at that point. But I wanted to set some goals to do some positive things. And like, to break it down, when I was young, oftentimes school counselors, even family members, they would walk by us, and we didn't have any opportunity. Like, folks will walk by us and say, "You little young guys need to go get a job or start your own business and do stuff," and then they would leave.
Right.
And what I would say, like when I got older in therapy, I said, nobody who looked like me, who came from where I came from, ever like sat down with me, like, how do you even like write a resume? Like, how do you write a business plan? Like, we just didn't know. And so in my mind, I wanted to become that positive example that went back into these so-called tough neighborhoods and show people how to do these things. And so that's been like the driving force for me, even today.
Right, you're the expander now.
Yeah, yeah. I like this term too. Like, this is new. I'm gonna have to study up on this.
Yeah, it's something that I've really appreciated. I think, when I was reading your book too, and you had your caseworker, and
Yeah.
she was essentially saying, you can't go to Nordstrom, it's too nice for you.
Yeah.
You're an ex-convict, there's nothing for you here. Can you
Right.
talk about, as a writer and someone who expresses themselves through language and art, can you talk about the importance of language in how it shapes perceptions and how it creates or blocks opportunities?
Absolutely. It's important, and especially for young people. Of when I was in school, like teachers sometimes would say, "You're gonna end up dead or in jail," and it's like, it's not something you should be telling like young people. But like that type of language, when my caseworker was saying this, I had already had 14, 15 years of therapy, and I went to college. Like, I knew what my capabilities were. And through, I guess what I learned through therapy is like, I could either choose to interpret like her comments and be angry and cuss her out or whatever, or I could just use that and channel it into energy to prove her wrong.
Right.
And that's one of the things that like I'm very adamant about today. And it's like, it's always going to be someone who is going to be against you, that's going to not want to see you succeed. And like, don't let that beat you up, but just prove them wrong. And, I write about a time like after that, maybe a year or two after that, and I became successful. And, I had my tailored suit on, and I saw this caseworker, and I was nice to her. But like, I did let her know. She was like, "Are you working here?" And I said, "All these people, they work for me. This building, I'm building this right here." And I can see it on her face. But like, it's not cool. It's not classy to be like disrespectful in moments like that. You just got to prove people wrong by just really like working hard.
Right. Yeah. But one of the things you said was, out of that, I felt anger, but more so I felt determination.
Yeah, absolutely. And it
So,
still drives me to this day. Like, I have chips on my shoulder, but it's like, I just got to work harder.
yeah. And do you feel like that's something that could be channeled in these communities too?
Right. Yeah. So it's one of those things. So when I first started my first company, furniture company, and then I started a contracting company afterward, and I would hire people mostly who came off from prison or people who was dealt a bad hand in life. And like, I had, a really bad hand dealt to me. And I would tell people that the world and other employers do not care. The world will step on you if you go into an interview and you talk about all the stuff you've been through. And like, I sympathize, but like, nobody really cares, right? Not the way you do. And so you gotta be confident. And when you approach employers, you got to talk about what value do you add to the company. What are your dreams? What are your goals? What are your strong suits? And just work hard and save your money, build your credit up.
I think something that might be helpful. I know a lot of people are business owners or people who have the potential to hire that are either going to watch this or who are present today. And I
Right.
know that I've been in conversation with some people who would like to hire previously incarcerated people, but
Right.
there's a sense of fear, especially if there's a violent crime that's publicly available on the record. And
Right.
so when you're saying that you predominantly hire people coming out of prison, what, like, I mean, is it just because what I say to people is like, you can, like, criminal record or not, you catch a vibe of someone, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can tell if someone has malintent or is, still on a path to recovery.
Right.
Um, or if they've fully recovered. So, I think what is something that you would tell employers, potential employers, on how to navigate the employment process for previously incarcerated individuals?
So this is a really, really good topic, right? And I guess because of my experience, I have a really fine-tuned like BS radar. So it's real hard to bullshit me, right? When you sit down for an interview. And I just would encourage employers to do the same thing. Also, references
Right.
are important too, right? Check the references and ask a bunch of questions or whatever. It's really hard to fake all of this stuff. And even when some of the folks who I mentor a lot of people, and some people will say, "Man, I don't want to work no job where I'm making like $10 an hour, ain't enough money." And it's like, dude, you unemployed. You just came home from prison and you work this job in order to work the job that you want to work, but you got to build up some type of track record. So work that $10 an hour job and get that good reference. And so references are very important. And also, I started doing like interesting stuff in like interviews, giving uh, folks problems to try to solve to see how they handle stuff, and just like be real creative in your interviewing like strategy to see how people perform. And
Mhm.
it's really hard to BS
Yeah.
like people like in this space, and so make your decisions based on that. And I will say that there is a large percentage, I know this from experience, a large percentage of people who come home from prison who really, really like want to turn their lives around and deserve an opportunity. And I've seen this like dozens and dozens of times. They will outwork everyone.
Right.
They'll outwork everyone. And it's the same thing in college. Like when I was in college, like we outworked the folks in the outside world.
Right. Because it's going back to what you were talking about before, proving everyone wrong, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what can you talk about what your first job was out of prison, and just
Yeah.
what was it like to walk us through that day, right? Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get out and
So,
yeah.
so I was nervous as I don't know what, and most people would think, yeah, you should be happy, but it was the new world, right? And so I got out and I was walking around. I thought people were crazy. I saw everybody like talking to themselves, and I didn't know about the earpieces where like the hands free.
Yeah.
Where I said, why is everybody like talking to themselves, right? But I was super nervous, and I was sleeping on my friend's sofa, and like the first thing I did was, I heard about like Google and YouTube, and I was like, let me get this straight. I can punch in a question, and I can just like a tutorial can pop up. And I didn't know how to tie ties. I knew I needed to get a job. So I'm like punching this stuff. And I stayed up all night like doing this. And it was like, we can like order food and like, Uber and stuff. They could just like deliver it to you. It's like, yeah, whatever you want. And I just couldn't believe it. And, it took me a while to get my first job, probably about 2 months. But I did have a college degree. I did re-enroll. I'm into a University of Baltimore, and I started developing relationships with my professors. Making sure I got good grades, and I was able to gain employment because my professors were references, and that's the number one way how you gain employment anyway is through having relationships with people.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, first of all, it's so crazy that in the transitional services that the prison provides, that they don't give you any training on just like every day, like this is what you're going to expect. People are like, Chris, people are walking around talking to themselves these days, like
Yeah.
there's no like education on just what society looks like now and how to navigate that, which already sets you at a disadvantage.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, and it's it's crazy depending on who you ask, right? So like I would say, you would probably say, we think this system is broken and it doesn't like equip people to be prepared to re-enter society. But somebody else would say that it's working just fine because when you look at it, like prison has been turned into a business, right? So that they're making money, folks are lobbying, kickbacks are going to and everyone, and they want to get people back they want to keep those beds filled, and so it's very challenging for folks to stay out.
yeah, it was interesting. I was having a conversation the other day because I want to create this think tank at ASU that essentially is multidisciplinary, includes people who have gone through the system themselves. And, there's always, and I would ask you this because you've been through it, there's always the conversation that happens amongst abolitionists or people who are invested in this topic where we say prisons don't work. We know they cause more harm than good. They don't deter crime. Then someone asks in the conversation, okay, but what do we do with Johnny the murderer or Johnny the
Right.
rapist or the guy
Right.
that actually we need to get off the streets? And then the conversation ends with, well, shit, I don't know. And then we move on, right? And
So
so the idea is that I would create a space where literally that is the only question that we are attending to. Like, how
okay.
are we creating a space that can keep the public safe, but also is informed by the history of racism in America and is informed by marginalization and doesn't necessarily punish through isolation and stigmatization, but just serves as almost a placeholder or whatever you think, if you've thought about this at all.
Yeah,
Um,
I think about this a lot actually,
yeah,
because I go back into the prisons now.
yeah,
I fund prison programs and stuff through my foundation, and like just to go back to the beginning of like your statement, about prison and like the rapists and stuff. Like to be honest, like I grew up in prison, and I write about this a little bit, and to be straight up with you, there is a small percentage of people in prison that they probably belong there,
yeah,
right? I know it's strange coming from me saying that, but I've been around. I've seen people get killed. I've seen people kill other people and stuff like that. But the most important thing to think about is this, right? A lot of people who end up in prison, uh, and I've sat down, I've had therapy with these people for years. A lot of these people were dealt really bad hands in life, worse than mine, right? No educational opportunities, years and years and years of abuse, right? Sexual abuse, right? A lot of these rapists, right, have been raped and abused themselves, right? All of these young people, mostly like when all this stuff happened to them, did not have access to like therapy and treatment and services. And even in my community, like we were told, just get over it. And like these are unresolved like issues and trauma that's inside folks' entire communities, right? So at some point, we all know that hurt people hurt people. So like they end up in prison because they do something, they haven't resolved like these issues, right? And and yeah, like you should be punished if you commit crimes, but we're paying for this as taxpaying citizens, right? So while they're in there, wouldn't we all want them to get the help to correct any of these deficiencies, to get some education? So that because 95% of people who go to prison, they come back out. Do we want them to be worse when they come out? So like we want them to get therapy, want them to get some education. So when they get out, they figure out like how they ended up in prison. And when they come out, they don't go back. They don't come out worse, and they don't hurt people. They don't like break into your houses and kill someone else, right? And we all know this. Like the science supports this. Even a little bit of therapy and education reduces the recidivism rate.
right. I think it's so powerful to hear you say that you grew up in prison because I think that for so many people who have not been in a prison, who have not worked in a prison, who have not gone to prison, it almost is perceived as this time vortex where time
Yeah.
stands still, nothing happens, there's no growth, and then they're just like popped, they like suck out, they're like in this limbo black
Yeah.
hole that they're floating, and then they come back out. But so, I mean, you are growing, you are living in this confined space.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really important for people to recognize that. And, you know, I've done a lot of work with juvenile lifers who they literally are growing up. People who
Yeah.
spent 40 years in prison, that
Wow.
was their life experience, right? Like that's all they knew to grow up in prison. And so I think that when we humanize the experience and when we really talk about the fact that people are living in these environments, they're not just stagnant. It's
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, that's true.
I
It's
think
true.
the other thing, so just to loop back, um, I in that conversation that I was having recently about this think tank, I was saying, because you were just talking about the kickbacks, and I was saying how I need to find investors who just are there for the cause rather than the kickback. And
Right.
this person that I was speaking to is very business oriented, and they were saying, well, we have, Exxon has a renewable energy research team because they know that's the next thing. And so they're trying to get in on the good train, And so he was saying, you could go to these private prison corporations and say, this is the next wave, you might want to invest. And I was thinking, but this is that, like, I don't want there to be any kind of kickback in this. And I
Right.
feel like when we live in a capitalist society, it's almost impossible to create a system or an institution that is
Yeah.
just that.
I mean, you're right. You're right. So like money is a corruptible motivator, right? I think it's the bad. I like money, right? Money's great. It's a tool, but it shouldn't be your number one motivator because like once you get it, like you just want more of it. And when you think about like these predatory prison companies, that you got to think about also like the firms that put the money into it. Like they want 10x, they want 20x back, right? So they want returns, and so that's their sole motivator, and that's bad. And the other thing is this though, and this is what I've had sit downs with CEOs of these predatory companies and talk to them face to face. And I always ask them like, what side of like history that you want to be on? But then I also got to think about like racism in America, the structural racism stuff that's embedded. It's very very hard to get someone who doesn't look like me, who comes where I come from, to care about a younger version of myself. Some young black kid, some young black girl. It's like most of these people just don't. They don't care. They don't care about those people because they don't look like them. They don't come from where they come from. It's
how do
not
you
their daughter.
how do you get those people to care?
I mean, like one of the things like I've been writing articles about like these companies. You got to go after their money. You got to go after like you can take for example like the companies like Securus and GTL, these predatory prison companies, right? Like the parent companies who invest in these companies, they're using school pension funds to invest in this.
Mhm.
And like these schools like don't know where like they don't know about this stuff, and so it's about educating the population about like this is how it works. And then when folks complain about like crime and stuff that's happening, that is actually fueling it, right? So if you fueling this and take a person who goes to prison and these predatory companies like, listen, the average person in my prison made $25 a month and make a 30-minute phone call was $10. And so you got to make a decision. Do I call home this month one time? I want my coffee. I need my deodorant. I need my soap that I got to get. And they can't do it. So they get the deodorant and the soap, and then their families go into debt by running up the phone bills. And they pay $15 for a virtual, visit, like all of this stuff. And then they take your right to vote when you come home. It's just like a whole revolving cycle that keeps people incarcerated. And there's a lot of people in America who just don't know that the system is churning out and really like decimating communities of people of color.
Yeah, I think, man, I got my wheels turned. So okay, we're talking about the fact that in prison, like you got an education in prison, you went through
Yeah,
vocational training in prison. If we're to say that prisons work, it's because they are providing resources.
right. If we were to say that, yeah,
If we were to say that. So when we're talking about defunding and community reinvestment, people are
right,
saying, well, how is that going to contribute to public safety? Right?
right.
But literally, the prison model is the idea that if you give people resources, they will be better citizens and less dangerous when they get out.
Not necessarily, but like, but
No.
maybe, right? So here's the
Right.
thing, right?
The hope is that.
That's the hope. So
Right.
here's the thing, right? You can't just slide a book across the table to someone and say, and like if I'm the prison, I slide you like a GD book and say, I'm providing GD services, right?
Sure.
And like I gave it to them. What we need in American prisons, there should be educational mandates, right? So yeah, like most prisons have schools, they got stuff. People ain't doing shit.
Right.
Usually, like in these classes, the teachers like in there, like doodling, like on their phone. They're not like they're not providing it. And so, like if we mandate, like, all right, well, we giving you money because there's a school, there's a vocational shop. We want data, we want outcomes, and you'll be held accountable, right? That changes the game.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
that changes the game. Then you get a better return on it because then they have to say, well, if we're not really like running this the way it should be, then we're not going to get this funding. But like they get funded and the schools are crap. Teachers, they might lock the prison down. They might not have class for 3 or 4 days. They'd be like, well, eh.
Right. Right. And I think that this is a really good argument for when people say, how is community resources gonna keep the public safe? You just say, well, that's why we have prisons. Like the incentive of prison or the concept of prisons is that we provide services where, like when I've interviewed a bunch of dudes who have gone through jail or prison, a lot of times they'll say, like, and I hate to hear it, but they'll say jail saved me or prison
Yeah.
saved me. And I'll press them on it and I'll ask, do you think that it was the jail that it, I don't necessarily think that that means jail was successful. I think that
Yeah.
that the community failed you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If this is the place that gives you solace, if prison is the place that is the only place that you can get resources, is the only
Right.
place that you can get therapy, is the only place that you can have a moment to reflect, then that is more a reflection on the community than the prison.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. And then like I think like what folks meant that like people use that all the time. And I always get asked and they're like, do you think that when you went to prison and like did that save your life? It's like I never want people to think that you need to go to prison to be safe, but like, it's so much stuff to your point that's happening in that community, so many failures, that like prison sometimes allows a pause in your life to really like think about your trajectory and where you're heading in life and really like look at like and think about like when I first went I was thinking about conversations I had with my school counselors, conversations I had with my grandfather when he was on his deathbed, like all this stuff. And I just was like, damn, we should have been getting this when we were home as young people, like in schools. And other communities get this, by the way. Let someone shoot up a school or something happens in a neighborhood, a white neighborhood or whatever. It's therapy. It's this. There's people coming together. Parents are showing up. PTA meetings. All that stuff happened, and that's how it's supposed to be. But it's not like that.
Right. Right. Do you think, I mean, so even in the book, you talk about the electricity's on and off, you are getting eviction bills.
Yeah.
Do you think that in part the reason why you're able to take that pause in prison is because you just have these basic fundamental Maslow's hierarchy of needs? You have these needs met, like you know that you have a place to sleep, you know that you're getting food. Like, do you think that it's like, what percentage of people would you say in prison are coming from an environment where those needs were wavering?
85% at least. And you're right. So I write about this too. Was like, and it sounds crazy just thinking about it, but 3 meals a day in prison and like having like clean sheets and like an environment where I can just take a break and really like think. And that's something like I just didn't have at a point in my life. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is like once you have all these things, the top of the pyramid is self-efficacy, right? So it's like whatever you was like meant to do, you need your basics covered. And then you can start thinking about like what is my purpose and like what is it that I can do. And it's unfortunate that like some people have to go to prison in order to figure out what they were really meant to do. We
Right,
should be getting that. We should be thinking about that in our communities.
right. So let's talk about what you do and let's talk about your art.
Okay.
So tell me about how it's become, how does your art, because I know that you use a lot of the funds from your art to help people who are coming home from prison.
Yeah.
You are using, and this is one of the main takeaways from this conversation for our viewers um, and listeners, is you have figured out how to do something that you love, that you feel passionate about, that you excel in and
Yeah.
feel fulfilled by, while also striving towards social change.
Absolutely. I fell into visual art sort of by accident, and it was actually in the process of getting my book published, and I had to go to court to argue to get the right to be able to tell my story, which was challenging. I had to borrow money. I was living in Baltimore City. It was a ton of gun violence, and people were getting killed. I had a few attempts against my life, and I was in business school. It was just so much going on. And my contracting company that I own, I was doing a lot of work for artists, transporting art and installations back and forth to New York. But when I would get off work, I would work long hours, 12 hours. I would get off work and I would go back to the studios and I would sit down. I would be real tired. And my artist friends would just be making art. And I would ask, like, what is this about? And they started telling me stories about, racism and economic opportunities and stuff. And I kept doing it. I kept going back every day, like as much as possible. And then one day for my birthday, one of my artist friends said, I'm gonna give you some art lessons. And I was like, I don't want art lessons. Give me some money or something. And he was like, no, it's in you. And I remember him telling me, think about stuff that you care about. And I was like, criminal justice reform. And he says, you need to be able to defend your art. So any piece of art that you make, you got to research it. You got to investigate it. You got to be able to defend it. And he was like, it should look good too if it's going on somebody's wall. And I started making art, and I remember like doing like a few pieces on solitary confinement and stuff. And I remember how it made me feel when all these things was going on. Me having to hire lawyers and stuff. I ain't had no money, but I could go home and I can paint. And when I picked up the brush and dipped the paint and started painting, I forgot about everything. And so I still go to therapy. Like I was going to therapy every Wednesday. And my therapist was just very encouraging, just like put it on the canvas and just do it. And then I started selling my work, and I started selling it all around the world. Like I went to Italy and I stayed with like a famous sculptor, and I traveled around there, and I went to France and Germany and Spain and like just everywhere. And I've been selling my work all around America, all around the world. And it's given me the power and solace. And I've been helping a lot of people. And like the coolest thing about it is I love it. It's not work to me.
Right, right.
So it's just been beautiful.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's something that you do, like, to a life of purpose, like you're doing,
Yes.
you are engaging in something you love with a purpose. And I think that so often when I speak to people who are like, what can I do? What can I do for the cause? What organization can I donate to? What one-off thing, what like Saturday volunteer opportunity is there for me? And I think that we all just have to be far more purposeful in the
Absolutely.
work that we're doing, so that no matter what it is, and I think that it's so amazing that you have the ability to combine your passion with justice. And
Yes. Yeah.
I think that people were not necessarily like, some schools require community service, right? Like high school or whatever. And usually it's a day and you're like so over it and you don't know, like there's no class around why you're doing this, right? It's just
Yeah.
almost seen as an annoying thing you have to get done. But I think if we started teaching at an early age the importance of service and
Yes.
the need to work towards equity, then we would see more people doing work in a more purposeful way. Not necessarily that everyone has to work for a criminal justice organization or that everyone has to work for a racial justice organization, but that their outcomes of work have some impact in the field.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's very important. I'm actually working on some curriculum, like a masterclass style course based off of my book to use in prisons. And one of the things that I've included in one of the units was exactly that about, you can focus on self improvement. It could be about just you, but it shouldn't be. And I remember when I started thinking about the collective and like people around me and helping them. And at first I was resistant. Like I wrote about this. It's like, I don't know these dudes. Like, why should I help them? Like, I got my life together. I'm good. It's all about me. But when you start thinking about like everyone else and like people in your orbit, I think about like the feeling when I help someone, like the blessings come back tenfold. And it's been that way ever since for many, many years. And so it's gotta be more if we want to create a world that our children would live in that's better than what we live in. And so I think that should be like the goal. Everyone should do that.
Right. Do you think uh, something that I struggle with, and this is just a personal question that I'm interested in. You do a lot of work in prisons,
Yeah.
but you also, and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe not in the political sense, but uh, like ideologically, do you consider yourself a prison abolitionist?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Some of my friends, right? We have these debates all the time to say I don't think there should be prisons at all. And like every single person who has said this, never been to prison. And like I'm a champion for criminal justice reform, but check this out. Like I've met monsters.
Mm.
I've met people that like maybe they were mentally ill, whatever, but that cell door will open up and anything that's living around them, they'll kill it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like how where do they stay at? Like what community would they be in?
Right.
And so I've seen it. And so I'm not saying I don't know. It's complicated, right? It's just we should run our prisons differently. But I've met very, very evil people in my life. I don't know what you do with them. I'm not a fan of the death penalty at all, but like there has to be a place for them where it keeps people safe.
So then you should join my think tank, and then we. Because I was gonna say the thing that I struggle with is that like as you said, there's 85% of the people in prison don't need to be in prison. Don't.
Right.
And there's that 15 or less that are these quote unquote monsters or people who need extra service, right?
Extra, yeah.
And so I don't believe that the way that we have prisons today and the structure of prisons that we have today should exist.
Right.
And yet I'm drawn to work in prisons because those people I care about. But then I feel conflicted because I'm putting my energy into a system that I don't believe in, when I feel like my energy should be maybe put towards efforts that are trying to get rid of this system that I don't believe in.
So I disagree with that a little bit, right? So it was someone like you who was able to reach out and like tap into like my internal like potential or whatever. And I've met many people like you who, wasn't related to this person, but like was going in and or mailing books or sending letters, and like those type of seeds. I've seen it like dozens and dozens of times, and it's also confusing for us. And it's like, why is this person? It's like seeing this potential in us, and like that changes lives. And then they come home and they do it for someone else. And so and you also got to think about like what's practical. Like big ships turn slow, right? So you can say, yeah, you want to get rid of it. I tell this to my friends who are like, we should be no prisons. I was like, you think you can pull this off in your lifetime? And I said, why are you trying to like say like there should be no prisons? There's thousands and thousands of people who you could probably reach, who you won't reach,
Right.
who's going to come back, who may die or go back to prison or never get out. What about them?
Right.
I'm one of them.
Yeah. So again, back to that expander thing. Well, so it's almost 8 your time. So I'm going to open up, if anyone wants to throw anything into the Q&A that will start in about 5 minutes, go ahead and put whatever in the chat or the Q&A and we'll attend to it. You can type as we're talking and we'll get to it. But so with I know that you've been doing a lot of research and work on local elections.
Yeah.
So school the people a little bit.
Yeah. So actually, yeah. So I just casted my vote, I guess, last week. And I think about 2016, I voted for the first time in my life. I worked for a couple of years alongside some amazing people to override the governor of the state of Maryland and to allow people who've been convicted of felonies to vote. So that opened up the opportunity for 44,000 people in the state of Maryland to vote. So I was able to cast my vote. But I was caught off guard because when I got my ballot, I knew who I was voting for president and stuff, but they have so much other stuff on the ballot, right? Judges were up for re-election, state's attorneys, local ordinance of how school money and stuff, it was casino, legislation. And I was like, damn, I didn't know about all this stuff. And it's so important. And when you think about on a state level or local level, you think about district attorneys and judges and stuff. These are folks who have a lot of discretionary power to make decisions. A person who has a drug problem that gets caught with like $30 worth of like heroin, they shouldn't be sent to prison for 10 years. They should go to a drug treatment program to get help, right? That's a strain on the system. It costs way too much. It doesn't work. And us as citizens, taxpaying citizens, we should investigate like who's on the ballot. We should ask questions. We should hold our elected officials accountable. And then if we do this, we get the right people in place and power that make the right decisions. That saves us money. We can put that money that we save into our schools. It's just the right thing. But people often don't think about the importance of focusing on a local level.
Yeah. And I think, with tomorrow looming over our heads.
Oh yeah. I'm nervous.
Me too. It'll be pretty amazing, I think, to see how many people turned out to vote, no matter what.
Yeah.
But that civic service, I think people feel fired up now and I think are realizing their impact on just the social experience. So
yeah.
I think, this is an exciting time. And I think the fact that criminal justice is on the ballot, right? Like it's on the ticket. People are talking about that. And I think that this is exciting is a weird word for this, but it's an exciting time to be on this side of history that you were saying that you asked your friend, right? Like, what side of history do you want to be on? The fact that we are at a time where there's some bipartisan support for that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think now people are on it?
I think it's a combination of things, right? And I have this conversation a lot with people. It's about like at the end of the day, whatever side of the aisle that you're on, we all want the same shit. We all want like good schools. We all want to be safe. And you look at like this pandemic and how it's been handled, and it's like it doesn't really like matter like what your political affiliation is. Like you don't want to get sick. You don't want to die. Like people losing grandmothers and grandfathers or whatever. Like we want like the same stuff. And then we look at like all these people now with like the cameras, cell phone cameras and stuff, and we look at all these people. We've been getting killed, but like we look at it like you can't deny it. We can't deny like these racist systems and policies that's in place, and like we see police officers getting off and all the stuff's happening, and like I think like now I think the country has had enough, and I think a lot of people are going to show up. They are showing up. We see it all over the country. Policies are slowly like changing, and I think we should use this momentum to really like move the country in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, my friend who couldn't attend, she had texted me a question. So
Okay.
we'll start there. And again, if anyone wants to throw a question in the chat box, go ahead. But they asked if, so in terms of thinking, she worded it strange. Okay, let me try to figure out how.
Yeah.
She basically was asking if we could invest in just one resource to start in the community that you think would have helped you maybe not lead to prison, what would you say would be maybe one of the more impactful resources to?
I like this question. So I would say it would be a trauma care specialist in schools, particularly like young people. And you think about a young person, like I mean like elementary school. Right? I seen a lot when I was in elementary school. And you think about a young person whose brain isn't developed yet. What is it? The prefrontal cortex, right? Which makes sense out of like experiences and stuff that happens, right? So young people can't really make sense of like traumatic experiences when they're young.
Right.
And so like stuff happens and we just don't know why it happened or whatever. Like those young people need the right kind of treatment, because if we invest in our young people, it changes trajectory of the future of cities and stuff like that. And I think that would be like one thing that I would change. It's a bunch of stuff, but like our young people.
Yeah. What else would you think would be important?
I mean, and then like racial discrimination and like our criminal justice system and sentencing policies of like, you can look at 94 crime bill where it's like cocaine, like powder cocaine versus like crack cocaine. Like that stuff is just like ridiculous or whatever. And so stuff like that, just like creating a fair criminal justice system.
Yeah.
It's decimated this country.
Yeah. I think I had an interesting conversation with someone who works with the police department recently, and they were saying how so many police officers are thinking about how do we get, oh yeah, someone said, how do we purchase some Chris Wilson art?
Yeah.
Well, we can get into my little spiel in a second. You let us let people know, how can they buy some art? I was actually gonna ask the same question because I got a little clean wall space.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to know. So I think like right now my website isn't live yet, but folks could reach out to me through Instagram, Chris Wilson Baltimore, and just message me and I'll respond, and I can set up a virtual studio tour, or if you're in New York or in Baltimore, I can arrange like an in-person studio visit. You got to wear masks stuff. And my website, I think chriswilson.biz.biz is active. There's not a lot of art on that website, but my site will be live. But I would just say go through Instagram.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll put your Instagram. I'll just put it in the chat now. So
okay.
Chris Wilson Baltimore. All right, cool. Yeah, I was gonna inquire about that drumline art because
yeah.
That's my favorite. And the 12 o'clock boys
Yeah, it's
behind.
nice. Yeah, it's almost finished. I'm working on this. Yeah.
It's so good. Is it a commission or is it just a?
It's just a piece that I'm working on. I actually don't do commissions.
Okay.
So I just like,
Yeah. All right, cool. I don't even know where I was going. We can just we can end on a high note. I mean, I think so. Oh, right. What I was gonna say, trauma. I think something that, oh yeah, the police. Okay,
Yeah.
we're getting there. Okay. So it was this idea he was saying that most police are asking or are thinking, I'm out to get the bad guys. And what I know, what I've heard firsthand, what I would say you've experienced is that it's not bad guys, it's traumatized people.
Yes.
Right. And I think that educating, and I want to move away from this idea of training the police because training is not the same as educating. And I think education has seeps deeper. But I think educating those who we're potentially hiring to understand the trauma that people have experienced, which leads to criminal engagement, right? Like
Right.
it's I don't know. I
No, you're right. And so I think about this a lot. And, I look at like Baltimore, for example, right? And I think about how I grew up. Like the police used to get out their cars and like Officer Friendly used to come to the schools. And the police who worked in the communities, they knew who my grandmother was. They knew my uncles. They knew the names of folks or whatever. And then when it was like minor like altercations, they could like sit people down and we listened to the police or whatever. Now it's just like they just the enemy. And it's just like, it's zero sum. You can't talk to them. They don't like it when they show up. They like they slam you on the ground. It's just like it's a different experience,
yeah,
and it don't have to be this way.
right. Right. Yeah. I think I don't know if there's a way to get back to what you were just talking about in the previous generation
We're
with the
working on it now. We got to start over. We got to break it up. And you know how some people say like defund the police, and people get all crazy. Oh, we need police. Imagine your community without police. I'll give you an example. So in Baltimore, we got a bunch of helicopters that hover. And I don't know if you know how much it costs, like to keep gas in a helicopter and like pilots. It's a lot of money, right? And they just like, they only fly over certain neighborhoods and they terrorize the shit out of them, right? The spotlights all night just buzzing and stuff. And what I would say is, well, what is the return on the money that we spend for these helicopters to be up all night, right? And like they're not arresting anyone, right? How about we take that money that we spend on these helicopters and we invest it in some type of community mediation programs and stuff like that. So like that's what we're saying when we say maybe it's not defund, it's divest or just shift it to something that like really like works. Because like certain stuff, like why do we need tanks and all this stuff and all this like cannons and shit like that don't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think, yeah, investing in the resources that we know lead to better public health and therefore better public safety outcomes
Yeah.
is the main thing. Someone asked, are you going to write another book?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I was actually working on it this morning. So I will be writing another book. It probably would be heavily art related, but yeah, I definitely want to write another book. I hope whoever said that read the first book though.
They're gonna have to.
And I did the audio book too in my voice too. So
nice.
for folks who like, I don't read, but like you drive back and forth to work, you can listen to me while you go back and forth to work.
Yeah. We also got a good amount of money going towards your book, so
I love it.
Yeah, so I'll send that to you and after this is done. But any final questions? Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I hope that you found this interesting and impactful, and I hope that you also, I hope that you have thought about how you can implement or be more purposeful in your work, trying to go towards a place of equity through whatever means that you feel fulfilled by. Chris, you want to take the final word?
Oh, thank you everyone for showing up tonight. Thank you, Abby, for inviting me for this discussion. And I encourage everyone to read the book. Leave me some reviews, too good or bad or whatever. And hopefully, if you enjoy my book, share it with someone else because I believe it will make a difference in their lives. So thanks.
All right, cool. Well, thank you again, and stay calm, you guys. We only have
Yeah, we just gotta make it till Friday. It's gonna be a tough week, but we get through it.
yeah, we can do it. All right. Well, have an amazing evening, and I'll talk to you all
Okay.
soon.
All
Bye.
right, bye.